I was always a bit of a car guy when I was younger, more so than I am now. But when I was 16, on my 16th birthday, I signed out of high school to go write my driver's test. I got to get it right away. And they told me, you can't sign out for this. I said, well, I'm leaving, so I can either sign out. She said, well, you can't do this again. I said, I don't plan on failing my test, all right? But I was always just big on, I always wanted to drive. When I was, my brother, being 6 years older than me, he'd have a car there. Remember my first car he got, my dad brought it in. There you go, here's your new car. You owe me this much money, all right? And it was an old Valiant with a push-button transmission. You remember those? And in the wintertime, you'd have to wait and warm up so the buttons would thaw so you could put the thing into gear, all right? But I always liked that if he parked them in the driveway, somebody else had to get out. I get out there, and I could back the car out of the driveway when I was like 12, and I'd back it out, and I'd pull it back in, and that was just a great thing, you know? My mom used to tell a story, and I don't remember this. This is before I can even remember when I was little. But you remember the cars in the 60s, they had the taillights, and there was usually several of them pointing different directions. They'd have separate little bulbs. And she said that I would look and I'd say, oh, that's so-and-so car. It's got 2 over and 1 up, okay, and the taillights. And I would, that's how I figured out what these cars were. And she'd look at it, oh yeah, the kid's right again, you know. And I always liked that. Those things were there, and they were distinct, all right? And they helped me recognize those things, all right? We teach our kids to recognize things. We teach our kids to recognize colors. Say, what's this color? You know, that's red. Very good, okay? And then we go on, and what color are your teeth? They're yellow. No, those are white, okay? And we teach them colors, we teach them numbers, we teach them shapes and letters, and eventually teach them words, so they don't have to, you just look at the words and you just see the word, and you recognize those because they are distinct. They recognize those things. Hunters are trained on, and I was hoping that the Brother Joe would be here. He's not here. Brother Sean's not. Is anybody else here a hunter? No hunters? Hunters learn to be able to see tracks. Now, the only one that I can really tell is a rabbit. I can tell what a rabbit is in the snow. We got the 3 going there and 1 off to the side, and that's a bunny rabbit going in there. And you know, I can recognize those. Those tracks are distinct for a rabbit, all right? There's these 2 blonde girls, and they were walking through the woods. And they came across some tracks. And the one blonde girl says, those are moose tracks. And the other blonde girl says, no, those are deer tracks. Nope. Moose tracks. Nope. Deer tracks. And they were still arguing when the train went by. All right? But just a little lightness there for you, all right? Just a little lightness there. But you know, animals have distinctively different tracks. And there needs to be some distinctions. And Paul tells us of some distinctly different identifiers of what a Christian should be. And it's as we've been looking at the book of Romans, I've really fallen in love with the book of Romans. I hope that's kind of come across, and you've kind of really enjoyed this study as we look at Romans this year. And the first 8 chapters, we know that it talks about salvation and justification and all those different things of what God has done in giving us the gift of salvation. And then chapters 9, 10, and 11 talk about how God deals with the Jews and how he is faithful. He was faithful to the Jews in the past. He will be faithful to them in the future. He's faithful to them now. All in how this plan works out. And then we get to chapter 12, and from chapter 12 to chapter 16, it talks about how this is all applies to us. What a Christian, how to become a Christian, and how the Jews have that same offer of salvation, and even though there is chosen people, that is a different, there's no difference as far as the offer of salvation goes. And then we get to these chapters, is the salvation, it doesn't stop there the moment you get saved. Brother Joe, again, he was mentioning that him and Bridget on Friday will have been married 55 years. Congratulations to Joe and Bridget, 55 years. Are things different now, Bridget, than they were 55 years ago? Certainly, okay, because things progress, things change, all right? Is there anybody more than 55 years here? Got anybody more than 55? Penny, how many? 57? 57. That's good, Penny. All right. Anybody, I hear 58. 59, going once, going twice. All right. But how many for you guys, Wayne? 50-something. 54? He's checking with the boss, all right? Is it 54? Yeah, she's got it right, all right? Good. You got some points there, Wayne. 54, close it in, all right? But things are different now than they were 54 years ago. For one thing, Brother Wayne wasn't even saved 54 years ago. Right, Brother Wayne? All right? Things are better now. Things are much better now. But things change. And you know, when you get saved, things change. Things need to change in us when we get saved. It just doesn't stop there. You just don't get saved and then you're done. There's a process of being sanctified and becoming more like Christ. And there's ways to grow. And Paul lays that out as we go through this next little passage here. We see that at chapter 12, verses 1 and verse number 2, it talks about our relationship with God. Now, if speaking on the hunter theme, all right, when on a target, you know, you have the target and you have the little rings, you know, and you get it in the bullseye, right in the center, all right, and then it goes out and you get less points as you move away. But right in the center, he starts here right in the center, okay? If we look at these concentric circles here, and he starts in chapter 12, verses 1 and verse 2, in what our relationship is with the most important, our relationship with God. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And that's the center. The first verse 1, verse 2 talks about our relationship with God. And then he moves out a little bit further, and it goes on verses 3 down to verse 9-ish, okay? No, actually, if we go to verse 13, it talks about what our relationship is with our brothers and sisters in the church, and talks about a little bit about, touches on our spiritual gifts that we have and how we are to treat one another with those spiritual gifts and how we are to treat our spiritual gifts and so forth. And then it moves out again. We're going to see it as it breaks out again, more again like throwing a stone in a pond, you know, and the ripples go out. And as we move out now, it's looking at our relationship with others outside of church, the unsaved people, and saved people included. But how are we to be distinctly Christian? There needs to be a difference between us and how we react and what we do and what the world does. God expects us to be different. We are a peculiar people. All right? God, we'll get to that verse in just a moment here, but we are to be a different people. I want you to take your Bibles, come with me to chapter 12 of Romans. We're going to look from verse 14 down to the end of the chapter, but just looking at verse 14 to begin with, he says, "Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not." What he's telling us to do here is entirely against our nature. When somebody persecutes you and somebody does something wrong to you, do you want to do good back to them? We should, but it goes against what we are. I did a little research on something here. I thought this was interesting. They did a poll of 1,000 U.S. residents, and they found that 65% of drivers keep a weapon in their vehicle to defend themselves against somebody with road rage. 65%. The most common weapon is a knife hidden. 50% have a knife hidden. 45% carry some pepper spray. However, 40% admit, you might want to stay in Canada. 40% of this 1,000 people that they polled openly admit they carry a gun in their car. 40%. Why? For road rage, okay? I read a little article a little while ago about some lady, and she saw this hit and run, and she decided to chase after this guy and got mad at him, and she's banging on his window, and she shot him. I don't even think it was her car that he hit. He hit another car, and she just wanted to make sure that the police got him. She called the police on her phone. They says, just let it go. We'll chase him down. She said, okay, and then she decided to chase after this guy. She thought she'd be a police officer. Pulled out her gun, banged on the window, you know, and the guy and shot and killed the guy. All right, and she went to jail. All right, but road rage. We probably all maybe have that a little bit. When somebody cuts us off, what do? All right, do we want to bless them, or do we want to see somebody run into the side of their car? Okay, but God tells us here through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit to Paul. He says, bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Now I want you to understand here, this verse is not just telling us to be passive. When somebody does something to you, it's not just telling you that, okay, well, they did that mean thing to me. All right. That's not what it's saying. You got to bless them. They do something rotten to you, and God says you need to bless them. Non-aggressive. It's not just being non-aggressive. It's telling us to go to the other extreme. You know, what Paul is telling us here is not anything new. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 44, he says, "But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." Those that use you and persecute you. I was talking with Brother Rich this afternoon. We were talking about how to do some of the editing on the screen, and then they nuked our whole computer system and shut it all down for this. No, just kidding. But as we were talking to him, a phone call came in on my phone from Colombia. And I didn't answer the phone call because I figured, you know what, this is somebody who is trying to abuse me and scam me for some money, all right? You know what that is? That is them that despitefully use you. What I want to do with the guy is I want to break his phone. Do you know what God says we need to do? I got to pray for him. I got to pray for him. He's trying to rip me off for $100 or whatever he's trying to rip me off for. They never even left a message from Colombia. Laura said I should have answered the phone and ordered some coffee. All right, but our reaction is to do something bad back to that person. And God says, no. I want you to pray for them. Let's look at it from God's point of view. Yeah, they're trying to steal $100 from you. But you know what? They're going to go to hell forever. You need to pray for them. Now, maybe me praying for them isn't going to get them saved. But you know what? Maybe me praying for them will get someone to come along in their way and lead them to the Lord. God says, this is what you need to do. Don't want to get evil mad at them, and break their phone or break their computer, or no matter how we might think about it. He says, pray for them. Well, that's easier to say than it is to do, isn't it? Jesus is on the cross. What are they doing to Jesus while he's on the cross? Well, as I say to you, love your enemies. Are the people that put Jesus on the cross, are they his enemies? Absolutely, they're his enemies. Bless them that curse. Are they cursing Christ? Yeah. You're saying, you think you're God? You think God is listening to you? Come on down off the cross. Call him and bring him down off the cross. Do good to them that hate you. Did they hate him? Absolutely they hated him. These are people that shouldn't technically hate. They're priests. They're Pharisees. They're regular people, but nobody should hate. But they hated him. Did they despitefully use him? Absolutely. Did they persecute him? Absolutely. And what did Jesus do while he was on the cross? Luke 23:34. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment, and they cast lots. My namesake, I think I've told you this before, my dad wanted to name me Timothy Norman. So my initials would be TNT. He wanted Norman was the only name he could come up with. It started with an N. Nathan's a better choice, but he came up with Norman. He wanted to call me TNT so I could be dynamite for Christ. That was his plan. My mom stepped in and decided to name me after Stephen in the Bible. And I like Stephen better than Timothy Norman, to be honest. I'd have been Tim Taylor, Tim the Toolman Taylor. You think that would have rode well, okay? But Stephen, he's an amazing person in the Bible. We barely meet him when he dies. We barely meet him as one of the 7 deacons that's chosen. We have a little bit about Stephen, actually more than we get about Philip. We hear Philip a couple of times. We hear about Philip in just some brief little snippets. I think there's 4 little brief snippets of Philip. But we find Stephen as he's there and he's talking with the Pharisees and so forth as they take him, and then he takes them all through. If you want a fast recap of the Old Testament, read Acts chapter 7, and he takes them all the way through the Pentateuch there, all of Abraham and the whole works, and takes them all the way through there. And then he brings them up to Christ, and he says, and then they take him and they stone him. And while they're stoning Stephen, throwing these big rocks at him where he can't escape, they're circled, they're usually kind of down in a bit of a hole there where they toss them in. In Acts chapter 7 and verse 60, he says, and he kneeled down, and I want you to look at this. He cried with a loud voice. He didn't just pray silently. He wanted his killers, his murderers, to hear what he was saying. And he said with a loud voice, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. Probably a rock hit him in the side of the head at that moment after he said that. He said, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. You know what Stephen is? Stephen is distinctly Christian. The attitude that he has there is distinctly Christian. That's what his actions are. That's what his words are. He says it out loud, all right, to tell them what he is. They looked at his face as if his face was as an angel, all right? But there they are killing him just like Jesus. Follow Christ's example. I wonder if Stephen was at the cross. Maybe he was. I don't know. Doesn't tell us. But he's following Christ's example here and say, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. They're killing him. They're throwing rocks at him. He's probably got 10 broken bones by the time he gets these words out before they finally, mercifully, God lets him hit him in the head and knock him out before, then they just pulverize his body until it's dead. But he's distinctly Christian. Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. And it's not passive, non-aggressive. It is bless them. Verse 15. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. This is an act of selflessness to set my feelings aside, whatever those are, and vicariously joy with a brother or sister or whoever that is. To genuinely have joy, to have that genuine rejoicing with someone who's rejoicing for them and for whatever great thing has happened to them. Or the other way, if need be, when someone is going through a very big trial, to genuinely weep with them. Weep for them, weep with them, because it is something that is real. That's genuine, distinctive Christianity, is when we have that feeling and that empathy for someone else. For someone else. It's like that song that we sing. Jesus, and then others, and then you. What a wonderful way to spell joy. Putting others before ourselves. Putting Jesus first. We do it within the church. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 26, it says, whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it, or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. We are family. We are one. We rejoice together. We weep together. We're not just here and you're in your pew and you're in your pew and so forth. It's we're together. And we live together. We grow together. We are together. We are a family, and we need to do that. And rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. There's and I believe it's in Jeremiah 15, it talks about the joy that he has in the word of the Lord. But in Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 1, he says, "Oh, that my head were waters, and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people." He says, I want to be able to weep even more than I do for Israel, for these people that have turned away from God, and things have happened to them because of that. And Jeremiah's eyes, he says, I wish I could cry even more. Rejoice with those that do rejoice, and weep with those that weep. What a powerful verse there. We see here, moving on down to verse 16. This is the very first part of verse 16. Be of the same mind one toward another. Now, this doesn't mean that we necessarily have to think the same. That's not what that's talking about there. It says, be of the same mind one toward another. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter if it's Walter, if it's Jerry, or if it's Wayne, or if it's Gord, or if it's Ian. We have that there's no difference on a level. All right? It's what James calls having no respecter of persons. Take your Bibles, please, and come with me to James chapter 2. James chapter 2. This whole chapter of chapter 2 in James is talking about being impartial in our faith. Just looking at verses 1 to 4 here to begin with, it says, "My brethren, have not the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with respect of persons," picking one person above another, grading people, any of that kind of stuff, all right? "For if there come into your assembly a man with a gold ring, and in goodly apparel, and there come in also a poor man in vile raiment." So you have two different people coming in. You've got a guy that has obviously got lots of money, and you've got a guy that obviously doesn't have anything at all right? And it says there, "And ye have respect unto him that weareth the gay clothing." Now understand, this is the proper use of the word gay, and we've changed that in our English language now. This is good and right. This is not talking about anything else. That's the right way to use this word, but it just bugs me. You can't even look at a rainbow anymore and look at that as a promise from God that he put in the sky, and now it means we've turned it into meaning something entirely different. But anyway, that's another story altogether. "But ye have respect unto him that weareth the gay clothing, and say unto him, Sit down here in a good place, and say to the poor, Stand thou there, or sit here under my footstool." So he's saying, you can't take the one person because he's got money, and you may be able to benefit from this guy if he's got his money, and you treat him better than you treat the guy without anything, all right? He says, you can't do that, all right? He says, verse 4, he says, "Are you not then partial in yourselves, and are become judges of evil thoughts?" Haven't you made a huge mistake? You see here in verse number 9, it says, "But if ye have respect to persons, ye commit sin, and are convinced of the law as transgressors." You have gone where you ought not to have gone here, and you have rated people in a way that you ought not to have done there. We see there, it says verse 16 of chapter 12 of Romans, it says, "Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits, rather." This word condescend, we use it in a different way today as well as what this is talking about. It's similar, but it's not talking about, looking down upon someone who isn't as good as me. No, it says that this condescend is you get on the same level as that person, all right? Because before God, what are we? We're all sinners. Either sinners saved by grace or sinners waiting to be saved by grace or being condemned forever. But we're all sinners before God. And he says we need to come to people. He says here, this is distinctly Christian, is to have that attitude where there is no, what's the word I'm looking for? Caste system, okay? There isn't any of that. We're there wanting to be together regardless of what our financial status is or what. I was actually kidding with Martina and Louise. They were talking earlier about somebody's. Well, this person is really dressed nicely. Just as I walked by, and, she must be talking about me. And Martina said, "No, we're not talking about you." All right, but she was just kidding around here. But I'm saying here that we ought to be able to take people at how God looks at them. Does God care if you've got $1 million in the bank? No. No, that doesn't make any difference. We're all sinners that can be saved by grace. This whole thing here is kind of encapsulated in this next verse here that I have, Philippians chapter 1, verse 27. It says, only let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. Conversation as your lifestyle, which you do. That whether I come and see you or else be absent, this is Paul talking, I may hear of your affairs, that ye stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel, that you work together as one. Not as better and lesser or more or whatever, but as one. Be of the same mind one toward another, mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. It's rooted in love and rooted in humility. I'm going to skip part of what I was going to say tonight just for time's sake, but I want to zip down to verse number 17. It says, recompense to no man evil for evil, and provide things honest in the sight of all men. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Now understand, this is not a contradiction to Exodus 21, Leviticus 24, and Deuteronomy chapter 19, where it says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's not what that's not what this is talking about. All right, it's recompensing evil for evil. When it talks about eye for eye and a tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, that's what it says. It is talking there about society. All right, it's talking about society, and it should be ruled by a government that is ordered by law. If you take and you just flip over a page, well, in my Bible, it's flip over a page, chapter 13 and verse 4, here it talks about those that are over us in authority, whether it's a king or so forth or whatever. It says, for he is, in verse 4, for he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Now that's what that Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy are talking about. That's that law. But understand this. Here it comes here. This is what Paul is talking about here is there is no place for private revenge in a Christian's distinctiveness. There's no place for private revenge. Vigilantism is never condoned by God. All right? But there's something interesting here. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. This word provide. When you make provisions for something or someone, you are planning something ahead. Correct? You have provisions. It's something that you have planned ahead. And what he's saying here is don't recompense evil for evil, but provide things honest in the sight of all men. It's something that needs to be thought out in advance. It's something that we need to do to plan to do good, to have a disciplined life, to be predetermined what we're going to do. You know, we think in our mind, well, if somebody does that to me, boy, I'd like to do rah, 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 and get this guy, okay? That's the wrong type of thought pattern. God says that what we need to do is we need to plan what would we do in that case that would honor God. Why? Why should we plan ahead what our reaction should be? Should we be persecuted? Should we be hated? Should we be cursed or abused? Why should we plan ahead? Because if we leave it to the moment when it happens, we're going to come with our instinct. And our instinct is to sin. Correct? That's the old man. So we need to provide things honest in the sight of all men, so that we need to prepare ahead of time. We need to prepare our mind to say, this is what the reaction that I need to have. When someone does wrong to me, this is the reaction that I should have. This is what I need to do. It needs to be distinctly Christian, not distinctly natural man. But it also needs to be a visible act of kindness. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. We've lived in our house for just over 40 years now. That's well over half of my life. A few years ago, now when we first moved into our house, the river is behind our house. We had one neighbor to the one side of us, and after him was just farmers' fields, and there was a silo there, and an old broken down barn, and their kids used to go and play in there, and probably right thing to do, but anyway, that's what they did, and it was just all farmland. We could do it, basically, they could go over there and play army or do whatever they wanted. It really didn't matter. And I would go down there, and we'd find our way down to the river, and it's a fairly steep bank. Back then, when I was 35 years ago, I could carry my canoe up the bank by myself. I can't do that now. I don't even know if I could pick it up. But I would go up and down to the river, and we'd go down there. We'd take the dog down there for a swim. We'd take the kids down there for a swim and all kinds of different things. And we'd go down there, sometimes just go down there just to sit and pray or just meditate or whatever. And I got so used to it, I'd just go down there whenever I felt like it. And later in years, I bought a quad to do some snow plowing at my apartments that I'd owned at the time. And I would go down there on the quad. I wouldn't go actual quadding, you're flinging mud all over the place and everything. It was easier than walking. So I just drive this thing down nice and slow. I didn't spin the tires or anything like that. And we had a bunch of teens go canoeing. And I thought, this will be good. I can go down there with the quad, and I can I made this thing up with wheels. We could throw the canoes on there, and I could just tow it up here. The kids would have to carry their canoes and all that kind of stuff. And I went down there, and I was pulling this canoe up here, and this neighbor that I'd never met before, he was only like 3 houses down from me, saw me pulling up there, and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he tore an absolute strip off me. Who said that you could drive here? He was a European fella, and he was just, and every answer I meant, he just kind of barked at me and shut me down. "Yes, this is my property. What are you cutting through here?" And he was hollering away at me and stuff. And I guess it is. I'm sorry. I just been doing this for 30-something years coming through here. I never even really crossed my mind once they built the houses there that I've just cut. And basically the corner of his property is 200 feet from his house and then down to the river, which is actually Grand River Conservation Authority land. It doesn't even belong to him. But the first little section, I'm actually just kind of putting across his property. And he ripped a strip off me. And what should I do? Technically I should have asked him. It never dawned on me because I've been doing it for most of my life, going through there and walking through there. And so I thought, I'm going to write him a letter. Write him a nice letter, explain why I did that, but apologize for what I did. And then I put in there a gift card for Dairy Queen for him. And you know what we need to do? There needs to be something visible that people can see that is distinctly Christian in our attitude. I need to apologize. I did that, recognize that I was wrong, but I made something different there, okay? It's important here. Recompense to no man evil for evil, but provide things honest in the sight of all men. Verse 18 says, "If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peacefully with all men." As much as lieth within you. It takes 2 people to fight, right? There's that little saying, it takes 2 to tango. All right, but it takes 2 people, but God says that whatever is within us, we need to do what we can to live peaceably. Matthew chapter 5 verse 9, this is Jesus again, still talking in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called" the what? Children of God. You know what the children of God are? Distinctly Christian. All right? Distinctly Christian. That's what we need to be. So whatever we can do, when it tells us there, it says, "If it be possible, as much as lieth within you." In other words, everything that I can possibly do to make peace here, I need to do, if it's possible. There's times when it won't be possible. There's times I don't know that man ever would still have anything to do with me, but I did whatever I could to help smooth that situation over, and he wasn't going to back down at all. Now he sold his house, so he's gone. But my point is simply this, is that whatever we can do, God says that's what you need to do. If it says here, "If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men." But understand, there is a line. if it be possible. There's times when that can't be. You need to do what you can, but there's a line that you cannot cross. You know what that line is? You can't cross truth. You can't cross righteousness. You can't cross that line in order to have peace. You can't have peace, but you're doing what is right. You need to do what is right. That over trumps it, okay? In James chapter 3, in verse 17, I want you to see the order here. It says, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable. First pure. You have to do what is right. I can't, for the sake of peace, violate my convictions on God. If I do, I cross a line, because that's not first pure, then peaceable. Gentle, easy being treated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. That verse just fits this whole passage here that we're looking at. But we can't cross that line. God comes first, always. God comes first when it comes to having peace or having war. God's got to come first. When it comes to our family, God has to come first. When it comes to our job, God has to come first. When it comes to our likes and our dislikes, God needs to be first. God needs to be first. So as much as if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. See here in verse 19, and here's the reason why. It says, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. Whose job is it to put out revenge or to discipline? Whose job is that? It's God's job. If he's telling us there, we need to give place unto wrath. The wrath is God's job. We need to allow him to do that. If we get in the way, what are we doing? Maybe we're stopping the wrath of God from doing what he wants to do. And sometimes his wrath, he's long-suffering. And God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And then in Ezekiel, it talks about that God takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. He wants everybody to turn to him. It's not going to happen, but that doesn't change his desire. But when it comes to something like getting even, like that just feeds the flesh, doesn't it? When this guy does something wrong to me, and you see him walking, he trips and he falls down. Giddy up, all right? No. That feeds our, and we might feel good for a couple of seconds there, and then, you all right, man? Like, help him up. But we need to let God take care of that. But again, we're holding God at the peak to begin with there, if it be possible. Sometimes it's not, because it violates God. And then we do what we can, but we maybe can't go all the way, but we still need to do what we can. We are, as 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9 says, I've alluded to this verse at the beginning. It says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Because we are a peculiar people. Because we are a chosen people. Because God has saved us, we are a different people. And because we are different, we have to be distinctly different. We have to be distinctly different so that we can show forth the praises of him who hath called us out of darkness into his marvelous light. Because we're different. His truth, his ways should regulate our response in everything. We need to prepare our hearts. As it says there in that one verse, provide things honest in the sight of all men, to go ahead and to prepare our hearts to be distinctively different. That's something we could do anytime. It's in our mind. It's in our heart. But we need to prepare, or we will act on our flesh. And as we act on our flesh, we will, more times than not, take the vengeance away from what God wants to do and put it on ourselves, and our vengeance isn't going to work. Our vengeance isn't going to work. Our words that we can say to someone or whatever we could do to appease our flesh, to say, well, I got back at that person, it's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. It's not going to accomplish anything, for one thing. But we need to, in everything that we do, we need to be distinctively Christian in our acts. And that's what Paul's telling us here as he zeroed in first on verses 1 and 2 of chapter 12 on God. Present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Then he worked out to, those that are part of our family, our church family, our brothers and sisters in the Lord, how we are to work with them. And then even out to where, it's not just those that we love and those that we care about. It's those that treat us like garbage. It's those that curse us. It's those that try to take advantage of us. And many oftentimes they do take advantage of us. And he says, even though they despitefully use you, pray for them. That's not a natural reflex. That's not a natural reflex, but that ought to be what our reflex is, so that we have that being distinctly Christian. How distinctly Christian are we? Good question. How much do we want to appease our flesh, or how much do we want to appease God? Who are we trying to please? In our thoughts and in our reactions. Paul lays it out pretty clear here. Verse 20, therefore if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head, and be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Be distinctly Christian in our acts. Precious Father, thank you so much for your word.